ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode or edition of Rimshots with Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. I don't know how we keep doing this, but we keep getting, they're going to start calling it a drummer show exclusively. Gentlemen here, you guys are going to know from a little old band back in the day called XYZ that's actually back out doing it again. Mr. Paul Munroe, how are you, sir?
Good, man. How you doing, brother?
Good. So the first question I got to ask you, there's a picture that you had posted on your socials there last week of a group of guys that it was that shot that we're getting used to see now where it's the audience shot behind the band. What band was that you were playing?
Right. That was The Priest.
The Priest.
So that's a Judas Priest tribute band that I've been in for probably about almost 3 years now.
Okay, that's very cool.
And that was at the Hard Rock. Is that the Hard Rock? I get all these theaters messed up.
Well, but it's good that you're playing again. I mean, and it's we're seeing all these bands that are out back.
House of Blues, sorry, man. House of Blues.
Is that in
Anaheim? In Anaheim,
right
by Disneyland.
So obviously, you're happy to be back out at it again after everything that we've gone through the last couple of years. I said you're happy to be back at it again after things have been offline for a couple of years, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I took a long hiatus, to just kind of take care of biz and do some things. I'm still playing a little bit, but not nearly as much as I play now. So, it is good to be back, and it kind of feels like just taking over where I left off before, but just a few years later. It doesn't seem like that much of a gap in between, but there was.
Well, so a friend of mine who's not a drummer, he's a guitar player, but he said you should get Paul on. His buddy of mine out here named Wayne Monroe, or Cabot, sorry. And I said, yeah, well, I feel like I'll have to apologize to Paul because I'm going to owe him some royalty check, because I will tell you, those first two albums that you put out with XYZ, I ripped an awful lot of stuff off of them for some of my own material. Just saying. True story. And what I want to cover, because I found your drumming was where some guys might have been more rudimentary, maybe going around the kit. You did a lot more patterns, and you did a lot more interesting things between hands and feet. And what was your background leading up to getting in that band?
So, I mean, my background as a drummer, before I even got my first drum set, all I did was rudiments. So I went through the whole Buddy Rich, book of snare drum rudiments, and I was a very rudimental drummer. So I had that approach because, when you play the drums, Sean, I mean, if all you can play is a single stroke roll, which is guess what? Guess what your fills are going to sound like? Right? So the more patterns and more things that you can come up with your hands and even hand-feet combinations, then you start implementing them into like a drum vocabulary, so to speak, right? And now you have this vocabulary instead of just only speaking one language. And that becomes very limited and very boring after a while, even for yourself. If you're always playing the same things over and over, you always sound the same every single day, then, there's nothing really to shoot for. So I came from a very rudimental background. So that's probably, what you're hearing. And I was schooled very well ever since the early days. But drumming wise, Simon Phillips was one of my big influences growing up.
Well, and I remember the first hearing that first album, a friend of mine had got it, and he said, man, you got to hear this. And I didn't know the background of the band at all. And obviously, you had a singer with the big voice. And, there was a lot of singers in that day that had the big voices, but it was a unique sound. The thing that caught me right away, because I was so used to listening to drummers that kind of, went, left to right or right to left or type thing. We were listening to Maggie, and the fill, I'm going to sound geeky here, but the fill going into the second verse was a hand-foot combination that I had never really heard that much before, that I was like, wow, that's what the hell's going on there. And going to tell you, bro, I stole that in a couple of my tunes. I just found it so interesting.
And it might be one of the licks that I stole. So
fair enough.
It goes all the way around, man. I mean, it's funny that you said that because, well, your name's Sean McKenna. Are you related to Ted McKenna?
I am not.
Okay, Ted, you know who Ted McKenna is?
Absolutely.
Great drummer from the Michael Schenker group. And one of the songs he plays on is feels like a good thing. right? And the beginning fills right,
Yeah.
which is the same exact fill you'll hear on "Come On and Love Me" on the XYZ. So I stole a couple things. And Maggie, it's funny that you mentioned that, because a lot of those fills, my friends, when I was going to Musicians Institute, had a lot of friends over there. They were very supportive, and they're always like mouthing out these drum patterns, like, you should put this one in there. A blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you know what? That actually sounds pretty cool, and I think I got a place for that. So not only did I steal from drummers, I stole from my friends. Whatever ideas I heard ended up on that album.
So I mean, and I did know that you went to the Drum Institute, which and the other offshoot of that, I guess, was GIT, that was churning out
Mhm.
guys left, right, and center. What was that environment like? Obviously, it must have been great from the standpoint of getting to play and learning, but was there an element of you sit around and get with different people and jam and be creative from that aspect too?
Yeah, I mean, the drumming community there and at that time was just a family of friends. So everybody helped each other. And we had these little cubbies that we would practice in. And then, we'd have social time, and everyone was always playing like 10 hours a day. You're going to this class, you're going to that class, you're doing this performance class, you're playing a show, you're doing, there's all these things going on. So you're always playing. But it wasn't uncommon for you to just hear something really cool from the guy next door and just kind of like, hey, man, that was really cool, man. Can I steal that? And, that's how we kind of traded licks, and everybody would just share. Everyone was real willing to just share. So the environment was, today it's more competitive. Like, some drummers are, they don't even want to talk to you. They don't want to look at you. I'm not like that. I'm like, what happened to the brotherhood? This
Right.
is where and I don't know if guitar players are like that or singers are like that, but drummers usually like stay really tight. And that was the vibe I got there, which was really, really cool. It was a great learning experience, a lot of great drummers, and still some of the stuff, practice techniques I use today.
So you're talking about you went on a hiatus and then you got back in. You're playing more than you ever have. When you went on that hiatus, and I mean, obviously it's nobody's business why you did or whatever, but I guess what was the point where you finally said, "Geez, I got to get back at this. I spent all this time learning my instrument. I spent all this time getting to the point and level where I am." What was the kind of the touch point that had made you decide, "Hey, it's time to get back into this thing"?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when you get into the habit of doing something, whether good or bad, it just becomes a habit. And I got into the habit of kind of not playing. And it's like not going to the gym. If you don't go to the gym for 3 months, 4 months, five, what's one more day? And then it just kind of prolongs, right? So that's kind of what was happening. And I just was walking around, scratching my head all day long. Like, something's missing, something. I mean, it was that long, like probably 15 years, just really not playing at all.
Hmm.
And something was just not set. I'm working, I'm doing this, I'm making money, but something in my heart was just not, fulfilled, and I couldn't figure it out. And one day I was sitting in my office, and I had my drumsticks on my pad in the corner, and I just looked over there and went, huh, maybe that's it. Maybe that's what I'm missing. And then I started getting chills, thinking about it. Went over, started playing on the pad a little bit. I'm like, you know what? This is it. This is what I was meant to do. This is what I've been missing. And so I got a studio over in San Pedro for the past 4 years, and I've been there like every single day.
Well, that's not, and I was going to ask you how much do you practice, because you ask different people, and some people are like, it's X amount a day, it's X amount a week. Sometimes I get a step away. I know myself, I actually have a bit of a guilty feeling if I don't do a little bit of work every day. I'm not 26 anymore, so I think that just to keep your body and mind in a certain way and your muscles in a certain way, you got to spend some time on it. How often do you practice in the run of a week or a day?
So, practice for me is, I've learned a lot about practicing and how to practice. So it's not how many hours a day you practice, it's how you use your time. That's the most important thing. I mean, you could get one guy next to the other, they both start at the same time, but over a few years, one guy will just excel way more than this guy down here, because and they both practice the same amount of hours. It's just one guy utilizes his time better. So to answer your question, the average is about 3 hours. If I can get 3 hours in a day, then that's good. Sometimes I go 4 or 5, maybe 6 on a weekend, but my goal is to try to get 3 hours, and that includes drum set and rudimental practice. So if I don't get the hours that I need on the kit, I'll come home and I'll do some rudimental stuff for an hour, hour and a half, whatever it takes to get. And sometimes you get 2 hours in, but they said it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something, right? And I've way exceeded that, but I also wasted a lot of those hours just playing the same things over and over, things I was comfortable with, and not challenging myself until I realized that I have to practice correctly. If I could work on things that I don't know, then in that 2 or 3 hours, and I keep doing it, then I'll just keep adding to my repertoire and become a better drummer. And it took me a while to get to that point, to discipline myself to actually work on things. But now it's a piece of cake.
And I'm glad you're covering that, and maybe expand a little bit more on what you're talking about using your time wisely, because I don't know about you, but I just think about how I had to learn and how I had to learn. I mean, I'm combination self-taught and had a teacher, but just learning songs, the old vinyl or the cassette. Right now, if I see one more kid that's playing Tom Sawyer, that's 4 years old, I think I'm going to scream. But it's a lot easier for kids today to process and get information. When you say use your time wisely, what does that mean?
Well, for a lot of people, it could be different things, but for me, my time is used by breaking up my practice sessions. So like I said, I'll first start out with rudimental stuff. I'll take out my rudimental books, my new Steve Gattiman's, book, and, work on some really technical stuff to challenge myself. Tommy Igoe, Hands for a Lifetime, is something I do every single day. Sometimes I go back and do the beginner. The advanced is very challenging, and I usually just go through the intermediate a couple of times just to warm up. So I do a lot of rudimental stuff, and then after that, I usually will start out with double bass, and I'll do different double bass exercises. I mean, we can go into a whole episode of all the different double bass exercises, but trying to play rudiments on your feet, playing 16ths, playing triplets, playing 16ths into triplets, speeding up, slowing down, always playing with a metronome, right? Alternating, sticking between your kick and your floor tom, your kick and your snare, alternating that. A lot of different double bass things. After that, I'll do some grooves. So I'll just focus on grooving, just grooves, no fills, and really make it clean with the metronome. Like I said, always playing with the metronome. Then this changes up. It's not, I do this for like a couple months, and then I'll change it up into another routine. I may be working on some linear grooves, so just some linear patterns that I caught online, and I'm just kind of working those out. That just opens up the mind and challenges you. I like reading things. I like reading beats and things I haven't done before, and going for that. And then I usually end it with playing some tunes for about an hour. I'll throw on some like stuff that I'm working on with bands now, some new songs with the Priest, or some XYZ stuff that I got to touch up on. We've got some more shows coming up. Anything that's relevant to my work now and the bands that are hiring me, I usually work on those tunes. And sometimes then I just funk out. I'll just throw on some good funk stuff, or some James Brown, or some Michael Jackson, and just play some real straight, 2/4.
I'm glad you covered that, Paul, because it's funny how I was at a festival this weekend, and there was a lot of really good players. And then there were some guys you could tell they had a ton of chops, but there was chops and then there was groove, and it was one or the other. So I'm glad you covered that, because really it's not about one thing. It's about a whole sort of host of things that you throw into the pot to make yourself better.
Yeah. And, when you said that, it reminded me of the UFC, and guys thought that you could just be a boxer and be good at the UFC, and other guys thought wrestling would. But then they found out very quickly you have to be well-rounded in everything. You got to be a good boxer. You got to be a good kicker. You got to be a good wrestler, good jujitsu guy. Know your ground game, know your stand-up game, and you have to make it all well-rounded, right? Otherwise, you're just kind of just average like everyone else, and you're not challenging yourself.
Right. So you know what? We're going to wrap segment one. We're going to go into segment two. I got a few things I want to throw at you here in the next segment. We'll see where it goes. But
Sure,
we're with
man.
Paul Munroe, XYZ, and some other stuff that we're going to talk about. We'll be back after this.